Okay, let's go. I played a game today. Well, technically not today because it's 1 minute past midnight. I played a game yesterday, therefore. And I wanted to look at it. I already looked at a bit of it with the engine. But I was... So, my opponent played something that was unsound, clearly. And I wanted to see if I could turn it into something that is playable, because what my opponent got looked interesting, and like I believe the engine eval for the position was +5 for me as white. I played as white, my opponent played black, and my opponent got a terrible position that looked interesting. So I wanna see if I can salvage the position to some extent. So let's actually look at it. We played a Scandinavian, so e4 d5. I take, queen takes, knight c3, and queen a5. This is just the main line, and I don't know much more than this. I do know that you should play d4 or d3, but probably d4. You do want the bishop out before that, though. I believe I've seen this setup, so pawn there, then the bishop here and the knight here, which is very, just strong. But I'm not, but I think that d4 is also just a solid move. And also what I did, which was knight f3, which is also a solid move. It doesn't really matter what you play, everything is basically okay. Bishop g4, which is not an engine move, but it is a move that makes sense to me. Pinning the knight, and it's not quite threatening to take because I take with the queen, but it might put, because I do want to play d4, it might put pressure on the d4 pawn, and I did play d4 here. So now I wanted to use the word prophylaxis, but that's not really the word that I'm looking for. But this bishop is already, because it's pinning the knight, putting pressure on the d4 pawn. So for example, you can play knight c6 and take here, and threaten it to take at least. And if I take back with the queen, you take the d pawn, is the point. So I played d4 here, and my opponent here played again a bad move, but again it looks very interesting. So my opponent played c5, which so I never really want to take, but I can threaten to take. If I take it and win a full pawn, then that's good, of course. So what I did is, well, it's attacked once and defended once like that. So what if I blockade it? So I played bishop b5 check, blockading the queen, threatening to take the pawn. Which means that after knight d7 you just take the pawn, and that doesn't quite win, because, well, it's attacked twice here, and but it's defended twice. It doesn't quite win on the spot, but it is very good. And the other option that you have, well, you can't play this, of course. You also can't play knight c6, because then I still take on the c5, I think. But I can also take on c6, and maybe I do that after. The only other option is bishop d7, which is fine, and then it gets off of this pin, which is also kind of a win for me. But I saw that, of course, that's possible. It does threaten the bishop, though, so I do need to do something, and there are a couple of things I can do. I eventually ended up playing queen to d3, which is probably suboptimal. but it does seem fine. I think you can't really... I wanted to look at a4, but you can't really do that because the queen pins both of them. But maybe you can sack the full rook here, because the king is so weak, and maybe you have like knight d5 there. Oh, but then the queen just goes back. Maybe bishop. It feels like you're just sacking a rook and trying to get compensation, which doesn't really exist. So a4 is not a move. I mean, queen e2 is also good, but then maybe I want this could open up the d file, so I want to keep my queen on d file actually, to put pressure on this bishop, which is why I played queen d3. The other main option is just taking and playing, well, spoilers. But yeah, queen d3 also threatens to... Well, actually, if queen d3 doesn't actually threaten anything. Well, it threatens to take here. And if you take first, I take with the knight, and then that's probably kind of playable, I think. But like, white is still better. Maybe queen d3 is bad. I don't think queen d3 was very good. Wasn't sure. I believe the engine eval for this position is still like +2, but you know, whatever. A6 happened, which I think is fine. I believe was fine, and it makes sense to me. You're trying to resolve the tension here and basically save the pawn. So I'm basically forced to take here, and my opponent takes back. And now I play the move d5, which is clearly the best move. It's because I don't want my opponent to take, I want to keep a d pawn to put pressure here. And my opponent played b5. So this position, we looked at the engine, is +3 for white. But if we get to a position that looks kind of like this, that is even remotely playable, like let's say +1, maybe a bit higher, +1.5, I might also agree with. Assuming that the way to win it is kind of obscured, so like, well, for me clearly d6 will be the plan, and just crashing through on this in the center because the king can't get to safety. If d6 is not the win, but something else is the win, and it's only like +1, then I will play this. Then it's going to be opening prep. This is the reason why I wanted to make this, to look at this, why I wanted to make this video, because maybe I'll play it. I don't know. Maybe there's a version of this that's salvageable, because you do have a lot of space. There's some pressure here, which is not that big of a deal. This pawn can be a bit overextended. You can basically make it... It is basically an isolated pawn. So it might get lost at some point, but it's really hard to win it and survive. Basically, it's really hard to survive for the is the main issue. Yeah, I already know this. I played the best move in this position. I castled, and the point is not just to get off of this diagonal so my knight can move, it's also to play rook e1, which pins the knight again, but actually no, it doesn't, because the knight defense. I missed that in the game. I could have played rook e1 on the next move, but I wanted to prep that because I otherwise get back ranked. I thought I could get back ranked. But yeah, my opponent played g6 here. Bishop f4. I developed. I think this is the correct place for the bishop. There are moments you might want a long castle as black. It is my opponent who prepped this and knew it was terrible. My opponent said that was a brilliant way to lose, because you just get completely slaughtered on these two diagonals. And there's not much you can do. So yeah, you do really have to go like bishop g7 and knight f6 and castle and sack a pawn and hope, or maybe not. Maybe you can save it. Maybe if you can, then we can play this. And, you know, I mean, maybe if it sacks a pawn, that might also be okay, assuming that you have counterplay. But yeah, it's really hard to find counterplay, because after the bishop moves you get d6, and I think this is incredibly winning, like completely winning, and there's really nothing here. Yeah, so I thought, I mean, taking is obviously terrible because of like, I probably take with a bishop, and the king gets stuck in the center. Maybe I'd give this check before. Yeah, I think I just take back with the bishop and then play rook e1, and it's really, the king is really sad. I mean, it can't castle in that case, so you take, come on, take, and castle long is a legal move, which is not completely obvious that that's a legal move, because the rook jumps over this square which is hit by the bishop, but that's fine. The rook can jump over those squares, the king just can't. It's kind of weird, but you know, I mean, it makes sense, but it's the only exception, because in this case, if the rook jumps over a square that is covered, then the king ends in that square that is covered. So that's not possible, but this is the literal only exception, that this square is attacked and then it's fine. So yeah, I think taking is probably also completely losing. My opponent tried rook d8. My opponent mentioned that they also have had this position before and then probably lost most of them, but yeah, yeah, this is really just nothing. My opponent claimed that maybe e5 was something, but I believe the win was take and rook e1 and and nothing. f6. Maybe it's take rook e1, and then with after f6 you have f4, winning a piece back, and that's not a piece you can lose. I mean, let's try that, because you give a check and you actually the knight can't even move because then you have rook e7, so it's not knight h6. So I mean, you can try this, but the knight gets stuck because you have to defend against rook e7. The next rook gets in, and white is also up a pawn outside of just completely crushing it. Also, you might have queen h3 here in some cases, and d7, probably that order. Yeah, maybe you have d7 and rook d8, rook e8 check. This is just nothing. So I looked at the move. The move I looked at was e6, after which I would have played knight d5, which you can just take. But this makes it easier. Knight d5. It has the same idea, so let's look at it here. And I'm not gonna show the rest of the game. Well, I'm gonna show a couple of more moves, but the game is 36 moves long, and I just probably because I blundered a bit and didn't go for the complete win. Instead, I just took 2 exchanges, rolled 1 originally, and then won a second one, and then won a piece, and then, I mean, it took a while because my opponent didn't resign. But here is the first exchange that I took. My opponent played c4, and instead of trying to find a win, I saw that knight c7. If you, this is probably dead, because I take this, and like this is all defended, and this is pinned as well, so probably this is also dead. Yeah, it's really bad here. And the only other option you have is what happened in the game, which was you just take the queen with the queen, because my queen is also hanging, but I attack a rook here, which I saw in advance, promoting longest longest notation you can, almost the longest notation you can possibly make. C takes d8 equals queen check. I thought that was funny, which my opponent just takes, and I take the pawn, and then I'm up an exchange, and like something like this is coming, and knight here is also on its way, and the bishop is also strong. I mean, this game was very easy from here. It just takes 20 more moves to win the last piece, and then my opponent is left with a piece against 2 rooks or something, and yeah, and that was good enough. But yeah, let's look at this game so far. So taking is of course good. Yeah. Oh, this is also kind of a fun fact. It's clear that from the engine that every other move is bad. It is interesting to look at, but the basic idea is just, why do you even play e4? The reason to play e4 is to defend against d5, to claim a pawn in the center, make sure that the opponent can't get a pawn in the center, or at least this pawn. They can get this pawn in the center, but then the pawns are stuck, which is also part of the point. And if the opponent still plays it, that means that they said that, well, white's not actually preventing it. Well, then you have to take. There is no other good way to play this. Yeah, queen takes, knight c3. Yeah, d4. This is all just fine, probably. Oh yeah, I've seen this before. After h3, you after knight bishop h5, you play g4, right? You just play g4 and then bishop g2 and b4. What's the point of that? We just refer rook one. Oh, I'm gonna have to look at this. Let's say here, h4, h5, rook b4. Ah, okay, and you're also in this, but this is not that big of a deal, right? Oh, rook d5. No. g5. What is going on? And then you finally take, and okay, this pawn structure is just like, come on, this is nothing, and you win the b pawn. Oh, this is okay. That's just b4 is just evil. I do need to learn this. That's interesting because people will play bishop h5 probably after h3. Yeah, but d4 is just a normal move. c5 is bad. And I give this check, which is actually good. I thought that claimed d5 was the best move, but now it's recalculating, and it's actually, I mean, all of it was probably very good. Oh, okay. It was 1.8, good enough. And you have to still play knight c6, which is also really sad. Because I take the pawn first and then the knight later at some point. Yeah. Oh yeah, and knight e5 was a trick that my opponent knew about. And we looked at it for a little bit, and it looks terrible, but it's actually not completely over. So the point is queen f3, threatening mate, right? Well, it's not technically mate, and it's also threatening here. And I believe my opponent said they play f6 here. You have to take here, and then I think this was the point. And you have a rook. You have two pieces for a rook and a pawn, and then you have to know this trick. And you have two more pawns. Or three more pawns and a rook for two pieces. It's not completely over technically, because the two pieces are good in theory, but the pawn structure is also dead and the pieces aren't active yet. And there's a pawn on a7. But this is technically not completely over. And if you're very good at using the pieces, you might even be able to hold this. But the pawns just run probably. Yeah. Yeah, queen d3 was not the best move. It's the third best move apparently. After queen e2, which makes sense as well. And yeah, c takes d4 was possible. That's probably fine for black. But then you don't get the nice structure that I wanted to look at. Yeah, just take. You have to take, otherwise you're not that much better. That makes sense. In d5 you can do other things, but d5 is the main point. And castle was the best move. I told you. b4 is possible, but you do really want to develop. Knight gf6 is probably the move I would play. d6 immediately. Yeah, makes sense. And the point of after taking, not that you can't take back, but it's this also. And rook e1, and yeah, I saw that, but I thought that after d6 you don't have to take, and now my pressure on the e-file is not as large as it was. Now I play d6, yeah. Now it's even better, because bishop g7 actually is really bad for the defense on the e7 pawn. And you do have to play e6, and then still, yeah, knight d5, bam. And you really can't take. Oh, you actually just take back. That's brutal as well. Just taking back. Sack a piece, and instead of trying to attack the king because it opens the king, you just simply take back, and rook moves, and then only then you start attacking. Yeah, this is, and you just win a second pawn. This is just brutal. Probably don't even take the bishop, just attack. This knight can be taken, but then you take the rook. And knight c6. Oh. Now you start taking material. Okay. Okay, knight d5, yeah, this is very winning. c4 is definitely not the move, but it's actually, it's already so bad that c4 is playable, or relatively playable. Which is, and e6 and e5 are dead. Oh, if c4 is the best move, oh, then your position is really, your position sucks so much. Yeah, and knight c7 is, it's an exchange. But I should just play queen e3, obviously. But this is winning, doesn't matter. A win is a win, and like, oh, king f8 is only plus 4.5. I really want to look at that. D takes e7, knight takes e7, queen d6, yeah. Oh, you have queen b6, so maybe you're okay. Because you get this, and then you can save the knight, kind of. Maybe you can try this. Actually, what? Yeah, no, this is nothing, because you win all of the things. And this rook d1. I would not have found rook d1 probably. Rook a d1. What? Oh yeah, that wins a rook. Or threatens to win a rook, and you can't stop it. Ooh, that's brutal. It's a double discovered attack. King g7 just sacks a piece. But let's say you don't play that. Let's say c3. Because it's a discovered attack on, you have to take back, on a discovered attack. And this is a discovered attack, so you have to take with the king and then rook e1 to get rid, what's it called? Get rid of the defender of the rook. And this, that, yeah, this is over. Yeah, so that's definitely the way better thing to do, but this is good enough, and it's not even difficult. Actually, let's do a couple more moves, because there was something interesting here. I'm not going to... There is a point where my opponent had a knight here and a knight here, and this knight was pinned, and my opponent played knight b6, which will be annotated as, or played this knight to b6, which gets annotated as knight b6 and not knight 5 b6, which is funny, but that's just an annotation joke. But there is something interesting, well, minorly interesting, which is that this pawn can be taken, of course, and my opponent doesn't do that. But let's do this, that, and I went to g3, which apparently is bad, but it's okay. You can take always, but if you don't take, I can't actually defend it. I can play b3 maybe, but then the knight gets to c3 and blockades. I can't actually defend it because then knight b4 wins, well, everything. Which I thought was funny. And it takes my opponent another... Actually, we're already at move 19. It takes my opponent... my opponent makes 2 more moves before they take the pawn, and I can't ever defend it. Which I thought was funny. But it doesn't matter because I have enough material. And yeah, we're half an hour in. I want to look at, I'm going to do a bit of opening prep now, because I wanted to see if there is something here. So actually I'll open a new board, which should still, yeah, everything should still work. And I just want to look at this. And you have to take, obviously, and I want to look at it as black, so let's flip the board. So there is, the main line is this, of course, and not d3, d4, and you take. You can even take with the queen there, which actually it claims that the queen takes is better here. Weird. But you can also just take with the knight, and then you just play this. But I want to look at this move. And then knight c3, of course, queen a5. Let's say d4. That makes sense. Yeah, I was looking at, I mean, I know that e5 is a move at some point. Yeah. But maybe you want to delay that a bit. And c6, and then the queen just goes back, is also a thing. So let's do that here. Yeah, if this is the plan, then this is not really fun. But if you can play c5, but then I believe we get to the game position. Yeah. No, we don't. No, the game position is this and no knight. So let's say that this position and then c5. That's the game position. Okay. But instead of the bishop, there's now a knight. So now it's a lot less bad. Oh, you just win the tempo also, which is relevant. And now, like, you can still do everything I did. And a6. Push. b5. Okay, b5 is still bad. Oh, that's really sad. We won a full tempo, and it's still bad. Actually, maybe instead of, if we just do this. Yeah, a6. I think not just my mouse was freezing and my I think my entire computer just froze for a bit. Okay, but yeah. And now b5. Now you're almost playing, almost cooking with gas here. But oh, knight b6 and you just win the pawn. Almost. Castle. Oh, c4 also. And now you win. You actually win the pawn. So, oh, you don't win the pawn, but you can still. You can just take with the queen and then hold on to the pawn. Kind of, right? Yeah, you can. But you shouldn't. Like that. But you can, like that. And you can't really hold on to the pawn, right? Then. Okay, so I like playing gambits in theory, but I also like playing up a pawn, playing against gambits, because the game plan is very simple against gambits, just survive and you win. So it's, yeah, there's a clear game plan at least, which I enjoy. c3 is funny, and then you just play on. This pawn will drop. And there's nothing you can do. Knight d7 is a move? Oh, you can't take because of mate. Nice. But you just take the pawn instead, and yeah, this is actually not good for black at all, and you don't really have any counterplay, and this is, you just have to survive. I don't like that. But we got to this position, which was... Alright, we looked at this, right? Not really. C4, Queen D4, B4. Yeah, this is great. If this all works, then I'm so happy. F6. You can't actually do anything about that. What's going on here? I mean, it's past midnight. My brain is fried. And don't you just... I think the point is that you... Oh, that's gross. Oh, that's so mean. Wait, so why not here? This is also bad because you... Okay, let's see if I can salvage this. That loses a piece. Let's see if I can salvage this without losing a piece. Or do you just get checkmated here? You have to castle A3 and knight A8. I can see why this is bad, but I am up a piece. That's something. And I mean, of course, opponents, if you play f6, opponents move the bishop. Most opponents do, like without thinking. So where do you... The best bishop move I saw was this, which is equal. That gets taken. This is also equal, but slightly better for black even. This is definitely better for black. And this is also definitely a bit better for black. So I just... yeah, okay, that's not... The point is that you have to defend the pawn, so you just play this, and... Actually the queen is very good here, and the pawns are strong, is the point. And you play e6, and... Position salvaged. Weird. So all we need to do for this, to salvage the version of the position that we got to, was instead of after knight f3 playing bishop g4, we have to play knight f6. And then all of this is okay. Yeah, queen d3, and you get to... Yeah, all of this seems fine. And the biggest, most important part is that this is not a main line, but the opponent does need to know a piece sack to be ahead. That's very important. I might actually play this. Ooh, I'm so happy to have looked into this actually. Yeah. Unfortunately, taking the pawn is... I mean, no, taking the pawn is also weird because it sacks a piece. You need to know that this is good. That the piece sack is good to take the pawn. Yeah. This is just... And like, f6 is still one of the better moves you can play. That's crazy. h6 is also playable, but it's apparently worse. Yeah, it's late. It's getting really late. We're only 40 minutes in. Like, I don't know why I'm so tired, but I am. I'm gonna finish this up probably quite soon. Anything I still wanna look at? No, I'll just play f6. I think, honestly, this is a very normal position to get to after queen. I also probably need to look at this, of course. But you just take with the knight d5 and just b5, right? d6, is d6 good? Doesn't look like it. Yeah, this gives me Benoni vibes. So in the Benoni you can technically push the pawn and it's still technically safe, but then you get queen b6 and you just lose the pawn. So I think this pawn will just drop at some point. Say a4, can you play a6? Yeah, you can, because bishop b4. Oh yeah. That's kind of the joke. The knight can't actually move, because then you play d7, but you're forcing the... Oh, maybe you can... No, you can't b-sack that. That doesn't actually help. I'll play this. I'm up a pawn. Pawn is a pawn. It's this pawn, but it's a pawn. And I'm playing black, and I have a bishop. Technically, my opponent does need to not take the bishop. I'll play this. I'll play this all day. That's fascinating. c5. I mean, and of course I need to know d5. Let's do a couple of minutes, look at d5 for a bit. And just, I mean, I can just play g6, but I can also just play a6 here, and play b5 on the next move, and there's nothing you can do. Probably bad. Yeah, this is a bit excessive, because the bishop gets here and pierces the world, and you can't fianchetto against the fianchetto. That's a neat trick you have often. You just skewer the rook, or actually you pinder a bishop, and yeah, it's called a skewer, right? No. Yeah, whatever. Discovered attack and stuff, and the entire world collapses here at some point, probably. Let's make some moves. Castle, castle. Apparently this is okay. It's not, but it's... Show me that it's not okay. Prove it. I think that's good enough to prove it. Okay. But d5. Do I promote variation? No, I don't. I do want to keep this variation promoted, right? Yeah, whatever. d5. I mean, I can still just play a6 still, and you do have knight e5. Oh, but then b5. Or queen d8. Let's say g6 then. I think g6 is probably the more normal move. Bishop b5 makes a lot of sense. Bishop d7. And then bishop e2. Why not immediately bishop e2? Then to block the knight, probably at some point. That's a weird plan. But I guess it makes sense. I think nobody would play it on my level. Especially since c5 is not a main line, so people don't actually know it. But yeah. So knight e4, castle, and you just you threaten to take, so you just take. Right. Can't take because of rook b1 and this. That's a skewer. That's what's called a skewer. Not a native English speaker again. Yeah, no, this is yeah. I don't even need the engine to tell me that d6 is the best move. Yeah. Okay, so that's weird. Nobody will play that. But take, queen c3 is bad, but just bishop g7, promote once. D6. Bishop g5. Then castle, and now this seems okay. I really like the move c4 in this position because you just sack the exchange, but it's actually really bad to take. I remember once looking at the game. I might have actually told this story already, and I looked at a Benodi player's black game, and I basically said that there were two mistakes in the entire game that they did that they made. And I believe there was two mistakes, and the main one was to use the beautiful Benoni dark square bishop to take this rook, and then the queen took back, and immediately the entire king side exploded, and there was nothing. There was also a minor inaccuracy at some point, but this was the main thing that happened. And that reminds me here of this, which is just, I guess, salvageable, but that does not seem fun, and nobody will play c4, so I don't need to care about it. But like this, and you do want to probably save the pawn somehow. Rook b1 makes sense. c4. I'm not sure I like c4. Everything is hanging, by the way. But you just have to play. You just have to develop. Rook e8. I'm not gonna play rook e8. Queen takes a2. I don't want to play queen takes a2 either, because the queen gets trapped, right? No, it doesn't quite. You can, after rook a1, I can just take. Also, I can go here. In that case, I will take that. That's fine. And the opponent really needs to know to start a massive attack. Otherwise, they're probably not that much better anymore. Yeah. Honestly, this position looks fun to play. This really gives me Benoni vibes again. And a5, just run. What you gonna do about it? The issue is that the pieces are really bad in this version. But I mean, it's a pawn, and you're up a pawn, and the engine gives +1, so I guess you do have to accept some things. I'll look into this for my next game. This looks fascinating. Is c5 Scandi. Yeah. Okay, it's been 50 minutes. Good enough. I'm collapsing partially. My brain is fried. I'll see you whenever. Actually, the next match is, I'll mention that, April 5th, if I remember the exact date. But it's early April. See you there. Goodbye.